All right. Turn in your Bibles, Ecclesiastes chapter 7. That's where our lesson is going to be at this morning. Ecclesiastes chapter 7. Now, in the middle of all the writing prophets, and of course, this may be news because we don't read through the writing prophets as much. We're talking Song of Solomon, we're talking the book of Job, we're talking about Ecclesiastes, and a little bit of Proverbs, although you don't notice it in Proverbs. There is a section in the middle called a wisdom section. And the book works like an accordion, or not an accordion, works like a book. There's this side, that side, and the very middle of it is going to be the wisdom section. And so if you look over in Job 28, the way Job puts it is he talks about a mine shaft. You remember this, we're talking 4th or 5th century BC when Job is writing, a mine shaft that will go down almost a mile into the ground, just a really deep mine shaft. And he says these people have dug it out and they're going up and down by rope, and they've developed an elevator with rope, and they will take this mineral out and they will distill it and make it into bronze or into some sort of metal or whatever else it might be. And he says that's the way wisdom works. You've got to dig down, you've got to distill it, and then once you have refined it properly, then you have wisdom. Now, what's the difference between knowledge and wisdom? You ever thought about that? What's the difference between knowledge and wisdom? Okay, wisdom is facts, or knowledge is facts. And wisdom is how you put those facts into action. Okay? Is that what you're going to say, Mike? Something close to that? Okay. All right. So knowledge is the gaining of information. Wisdom is knowing how that information is worked together in order to work well. And so that's an important thing for us to notice. So this in Ecclesiastes 7 is the wisdom section. And so we're going to be a little bit off of the flow which we've been doing before, but that's just because the outline of how Ecclesiastes is written. All right, so as you start off, what you're going to see, first 4 verses, tough times create tougher people. Tough times create tougher people. All right. One of my sons was here today. They're visiting, Matthew and Addie. Matthew runs marathons and all of that sort of thing, gets up every morning, runs miles and miles and miles, tells me he enjoys it, whatever, you know. Me, I run to the bathroom, run to the fridge, all right? That's me, okay? So you take his lifestyle, you take my lifestyle and say, okay, run a race. Who's going to win that race? Well, he is every time because he has disciplined his body in order to perform in that way. And so because of what he's gone through each and every day, he has trained his body to move in that direction. That's what we're going to be talking about as we go through here. Solomon, as he writes this, is talking about those who've endured tough times. They're going to be stronger. They're going to be ready when these next tough times come. So let's read these first 4 verses. A good name is better than precious ointment. The day of death is better than one's birth. Better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for that's the end of all men, and the living will take it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by a sad countenance the heart is made better. The heart of the wise is in the house of the mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of myrrh. Okay. Now, as he talks about this ointment, we're talking about something which is very, very expensive. In Matthew 26:7, as the lady is anointing the feet of Jesus, remember Judas gets so mad, it's almost a year's worth of money, a year's average salary. Marshall County, for a family, that's around $45,000. So that's a lot of money to be putting on somebody's feet. And that's what Judas says, and Jesus says it's worth it at this moment. Well, when we talk about this precious ointment, we're talking about something which is worth a lot of value. And what Solomon says is a good reputation, a good name is one of the most important things you'll ever carry anywhere in life. Your character gets you a long ways. Now, we live in a very different culture than that, don't we? A lot of people don't care about their reputation as long as they make a little bit more money. A lot of people don't care about what anybody else thinks. But this is an honor society that Solomon's writing out of. And actually it's true even in our society. What people think, what your reputation is, tells you a lot about what your character is. A lot of times we don't see our real person. You ever listen to yourself on a recording? And you listen to yourself and you say, I am not that country, right? I am not that hillbilly. Where did that accent come from? Or we see ourselves in a picture and we say, well, that's not how I look. You know, that must have been a really bad angle because I look a whole lot better than that. A lot of times what we think we are is actually different than what we really are. And so a perspective of somebody outside, sometimes they get a more true perspective. And so a good name is important. The character that we have in front of other people is pretty important. Now, what are we talking about here when we see here in verse 1 and 2? How is a day of death better than a day of birth? It's not talking about first person, the day that you're born or the day that you die. But you gain more by being at a funeral, the death of somebody else, attending a funeral, because what does that give you an opportunity to do? You go to a funeral, who do you see there? Family you don't see any other time. And a lot of times, the only time we get together as a family, it seems, is at a funeral. And a lot of times when we're at a funeral, we end up thinking about things we wouldn't think about any other time. We start thinking about eternity. We start thinking about our character. We start thinking about our identity and who we truly are. And so Solomon, as he's talking about this idea of wisdom, starts it off and says, you know, these tough times make you into the person you are. And we want to have fun. We want to rejoice. We want to have it easy. But we got to recognize that when you face fears and trials of many kinds, the testing of your faith produces perseverance. It makes you to be a better person, to be exactly what you should be. And so I have listed here, adversity teaches us the brevity of life. It teaches us to use our time wisely. And it teaches us to refine our character. I had a friend one time, he was making jokes. And he was out with his friends or out with his family, and he had done something, and he said, hey, quick, take a picture of me. And somebody took a picture of him, and he said, you know, at my funeral, I've got to come up with some decent pictures. And you know how a lot of times at funerals, they have that little sliding roll there of all the pictures. And he's like, I got to get some good pictures for my funeral. I'm planning ahead. He said, at least I hope I'm planning ahead. When you look at those pictures, what are those pictures showing? Usually it's somebody with family. Usually it's somebody doing something they love. They got a big fish. They're hugging Mickey Mouse. You know, they're on the lake. And as I look at those pictures many times, I think, you know what? We need to live life just thinking about that very last thing, that very last day. You know, what experiences will I have had in life? Far too often, we just live each day and we don't realize we only have a certain number of days. We need to enjoy what God's given us. And so it teaches us to use our time wisely, and it refines our character as well. All right, death comes to all people. It's important for us to prepare. Hebrews 9:27 is appointed to man once to die and then to judgment. 1 Corinthians 15:54 through 57, we're all going to be changed. And we'll all be there. So I don't like to think about death. That's not something I look forward to. But when we realize that we're all mortal, there's a time to change and a time to get right with God. And so when he says sorrow is better than laughter and a sad countenance makes the heart better, it's important to realize a serious face implies a thoughtful person. Still waters run deep, right? That's an important thing for us to notice. Now, Start here in verse 5 and let's read through verse 10. Verse 5 through 10. It is better to hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the praise or the song of a fool. For like the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fool. This also is vanity. Surely oppression destroys a wise man's reason, and a bribe debases the heart. The end of a thing is better than its beginning. The patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. Do not hasten in your spirit to be angry, for anger rests in the heart or the bosom of fools. Do not say, why were the former days better than these? For you do not inquire wisely concerning this. All right. Now you're talking about the thorns under a pot. What does that mean? It's talking about the wood that you have under a pot. And you throw those thorns under there, and they light pretty easy. They make a lot of noise. But if you just have a few thorns rather than a piece of wood, how long is it going to last? 15, 20 seconds, maybe a minute if you have enough of it. It's going to burn and then be gone. It's going to absolutely disappear and not be there very long. And so he says it's a short-term thing. So is the laughter of a person who's not wise. The laughter of a person who is a fool. It doesn't offer anything that lasts. He goes to verse 7, talking about moderation still. Oppression destroys your thought process. A bribe debases the heart. When you're oppressed, when you're mistreated, do you think rationally? You don't, do you? You don't at all. We had a man who attended here. His family attended here 7 years ago. And you probably remember him. He's from Egypt. He was Coptic. But he attended here because being a Bible-based church, he felt like it was the closest of most of the churches which he went to. Now, let me tell you about this person. What was interesting, I would talk to his wife. His wife works over in Murray, and I still see her every once in a while. And if you ask her for the picture, she'll show you. But the folks who are over there in Egypt, the bishop, pastor, pope, whatever he's called of the Coptic church, every day sends out pictures. And it's pictures of Coptic Christians in Egypt who are being oppressed by the Muslim majority. But it's pictures of children who have been abused, their heads are cut off, people who have been burned, people who have been blown up, or whatever it may be. And really the pictures have no background. You don't know the identity of the people who are there, of whether these people were Muslim or Jewish or Christian or whatever. And in his case, he says they're Coptic Christians. And the bishop sends those out every single day to all the people who are a part of his faith. And so the people who are a part of his faith will look on their phone and they see that oppression and that abuse every day. And guess what they think about the Muslim majority in Egypt? They're like, look what they've done to us today. And look how terrible and evil it is today. And if you hop on Twitter or you hop on some of these social media sites, people who are from the Muslim area of Gaza will send you something every day of what's happened in their community because of another nation. And if you hop on some of these Israeli sites, every day they have pictures of what's happened to the people in their area. Now, are those pictures true or real? They came from somewhere. But what happens is many of these people are using this propaganda to create hatred in their folks, to create identity to where there's a hatred or an anger or a fight against these other people. We're among the most blessed people on this earth because our country has been at peace for centuries. Now, I realize World War I, World War II, the Gulf War, but all those battles have been somewhere else. It's very rare that we get bombed or we get invaded or anything like that. So we're at peace. But a lot of people all over this world are under a lot of oppression. And as they're under that oppression, it makes it where it's very difficult to think clearly. And people will use hatred. People will use anger for their purpose. And what Solomon is saying here is when you're filled with anger, Take a step back and see who it is you're serving. Are you serving a president, or are you serving a political party that needs to make you angry in order for their purposes to be met better? Are you angry because you feel that oppression, and while that oppression may be true, is somebody manipulating you one way or the other for whatever purpose it may be? We've got to look and see who it is that's trying to get us going and why it is they're trying to get us going. And that's an important thing for us to notice. All right, verse 8. My wife may quote this to me because I will clean the kitchen and I get halfway and I get distracted. I will run a load of laundry and then those clothes stay in the dryer because I am distracted. And I'll tell her when she complains about something around the house not being done, it's only been 6 months. I'm getting there. Okay? A lot of that is joking, and a lot of that sadly may be true. If you spend your whole life starting projects and never finishing, what happens in your life? You never get where you want to be, do you? You never get to be where you want to be. Now, I have a little wood shop, and I play with the wood. It's a lot of fun to me. But I've got a project, a little box that I'm trying to build for one of my sons, and it's only been a year and a half, 2 years. And I'm at the point now where it's on a table, and I can no longer use the table. And I need to finish it. And I really am. I promise. I'm about to finish it. And then I noticed the other day there's another table, and I got a project on that box. Or I got a project on that table. And I'm to the point where I've got so many projects, I can't start a new project anymore. Now, that's a joke for me. I like going out there and hammering and sawing on stuff because, you know, sometimes it's just good to, when you're in the people business, to work with non-people things. Sometimes that works. Therapy. It's therapy. Yeah, it's therapy. Okay. But in life, if you start something but never finish, you never get to where you want to be. You never are able to accomplish. And so that's what he says. Is he starts off and he says, you know, at the end is so much better than the beginning. There's a lot more firecrackers and excitement at the very beginning. But man, if you finish your projects, life is so much better if you work it through and get it that way. Now, verse 10. Okay? Verse 10 is a big one. The former days, they were so much better than these days. Okay? How often we feel that way? Man, I miss the good old days. I miss the way we used to do stuff. I miss the way things used to be. We had a lady who attended here, or she visited here for a few Sundays, and she had attended here maybe 10 or 15 years ago. This is when I was here, before I was here. And I was talking to her afterwards, and she said, I don't know if I like it. This just isn't Benton. There's a lot of people around here I've never seen before. The songs are different. The preaching is different. And I've always thought about that because they told us in preaching school every 4 years you're preaching to a new church. Because enough people have died, enough people have been born, and enough people have matured in Christ. It's not the same place in 3.5 or 4 years. But we expect it to never change. And so it's hard when you've moved away to ever move home because it's not really home anymore. It's different than it used to be. It's just not the same. Now, what gets us in trouble when we say everything was better in the old days than it is today? What's the problem with that? What you got, Mike? Okay, yeah, when we think of the good old days, we have rose-colored glasses. We only remember the good stuff. We only remember those good things that were there. And we forget the way things used to be or had to be long, long ago. You know, as I say oftentimes, I'm glad I live today because, man, I love air conditioning, right? And I love cars that go over 100,000 miles, you know. There's a lot of improvements, but I forget about those improvements. I look back at the way things used to be, especially because I was a kid and I didn't have all the stress of being an adult, right? Okay, when we focus only on how things used to happen, we're not looking to fix the way things should be. When we look at the way things used to be, it's not allowing us to grow into what God would have us to do. Does the church look different than it did 20 years ago? Absolutely. But we're preaching the same gospel to a different world. We're preaching the same gospel to a different people. And so, yes, sometimes our sermons are going to sound different. And we miss that old-timey preaching. And while we have to preach the whole counsel of God, we've got to realize the culture we're preaching to and the reaching out to this culture, reaching out to this world, and the modern problems which people are facing. And that's what we do, is we take the gospel and apply it to the people who are here living today. But sometimes it's difficult because we remember those days of the past and remember how they used to be. All right. Let's start in verse 11 and go through verse 22. Wisdom is good with an inheritance. I've got to speed up. Wisdom is good with an inheritance and profitable to those who see the sun. Wisdom is a defense as money is a defense, but the excellence of knowledge is that wisdom gives life to those who have it. Consider the work of God. Can anyone make straight what he's made crooked? In the day of prosperity, be joyful, but in the day of adversity, consider, surely God has appointed the one as well as the other, so that man can find out nothing that will come after him. I have seen everything in my days of vanity. There is a just man who perishes in his righteousness. There is a wicked man who prolongs life in his wickedness. Do not be overly righteous. Do not be overly wise. Why should you destroy yourself? Do not be overly wicked, nor be foolish. Why should you die before your time? It is good that you grasp this, and also not remove your hand from the other, for he who fears God will escape them all. Wisdom strengthens the wise more than 10 rulers of the city, for there is not a just man on earth who does good and does not sin. Wow. Okay. Moderation in all. Okay. Be moderate in all things, even in your moderation. There is wisdom found when you are moderate in everything that you do. Wisdom's like money because it offers your protection in all the times. We can't defeat God. Now, verse 16 was an interesting verse to me. It just seems strange. Do not be overly righteous. Do not be overly righteous. Can you be too zealous as a Christian? Do you know you can? Oh, no, we can't finish on that. All right, real quick. Let me tell you how you can be too zealous. You tell everybody in the line at Walmart, hey, you need to come to Christ or you're going to be lost in hell forever. You tell your kids who never come to church, every time you see them, you're going to hell. Guess what's going to happen after a few days? Your kids going to listen to you anymore? You tell everybody how everything they're doing wrong and point out the speck on everybody around, you get yourself in trouble. 1 Peter 3, 1 through 7 tells us the best preaching you can do is by your example. And so be righteous, but don't make